You know that feeling, don't you? When your alarm clock goes off and suddenly the phone is ringing in your dream. Or your neighbor's dog barks and suddenly you're running from some strange creature. It's a common little trick our minds play on us, but have you ever stopped to ask what would happen if reality slipped into a nightmare? I can tell you, it doesn't just become part of the dream, it fuels the horror. Tonight, we're going to listen to 5 chilling stories from people who learned that the most terrifying sounds are the ones that are real. Our first story tonight comes from a father, and it begins, as so many of these nights do, with a single exhausting day. He said he finally fell into a heavy, leaden sleep, only to find himself standing before a giant, dark castle. It was monolithic, cutting into a bruised purple sky. And from its depths, a sound began to echo, a demonic, hellish voice that seemed to call his name, pulling him forward. He was drawn down endless, narrowing corridors. The voice grew louder, more guttural. He felt an unseen force dragging him toward the heart of that unholy sound. He was running from it, but somehow also being pulled towards it. The perfect, terrifying logic of a nightmare. And then he slammed into something hard. The impact jolted him awake. His eyes snapped open, not to the cold stone of a demonic fortress, but to the faint, soft glow of a dinosaur nightlight. He was hunched over, his hands clutching the footboard of his 4-year-old son's bed. His son was crying, horrified, and in that sickening moment, the father's blood ran cold. The demonic, hellish sound from his dream, it wasn't a monster calling to him, it was his own child having a nightmare. And the sleepwalking figure looming in the dark, making it all so much worse, that was him. That story, as terrifying as it is, has a certain logic, a sound from the real world bleeding into a dream. It's a rational explanation for an irrational experience. But what happens when there is no sound, no trigger? What happens when a dream doesn't just borrow from reality, but seems to predict it seconds before it happens? The stories that follow are different. They don't have a neat, logical twist at the end. They just leave you with a question hanging in the silent air. Our next story comes from a man who wants to make one thing very clear from the start. He is an atheist. He doesn't believe in ghosts, gods, or an afterlife. And it's that very fact that makes what happened to him so profoundly unsettling. It was Halloween night. In his dream, he was at a party with friends, the music loud, the atmosphere cheerful. But then things began to shift, the way they only can in a dream. One by one, his friends began to simply vanish. Not walking away, but dissolving into the background, the laughter fading into an echo. The house around him started to warp and stretch, and then he saw it. On the far wall of the living room, where a normal fireplace should have been, a portrait began to grow. It wasn't just a painting, the wall itself became the portrait. It swelled to an impossible size, 10 meters wide, 20 meters high, stretching up into an impossible darkness where the ceiling should have been. It was a portrait of his cousin, and it was terrifying. Her face was pale, her expression vacant, and her eyes were two black voids, pulling all the light and warmth from the dream. He was frozen, a tiny figure staring up at this monstrous, oppressive monument to his own family. As he watched, the eyes in the portrait slowly, mechanically, turned to look directly at him. He felt a cold dread that was so total, so absolute, it was almost peaceful. And then he heard a sound. It started as a faint tick, then grew. Not the clean snap of wood, but a rusty, scratchy, ear-piercing shriek, like ancient nails being tortured out of stone. A crack appeared on the giant canvas, starting from her dead eyes and branching out like a black spider web. The shriek got louder, the cracks spread faster, and with a final, soul-shaking groan, the entire 10 by 20 meter portrait tore itself from the wall and began to fall directly toward him. He woke up, gasping for air on his bedroom floor, having thrown himself out of bed. His heart was a jackhammer against his ribs. He was safe. It was just a dream. He lay there for a few minutes, catching his breath, the horrifying image of the falling portrait slowly fading. And then his phone shattered the silence. It was his aunt. His cousin, the girl from the portrait, had been found dead. An overdose. The call came just minutes after he woke up from the dream of her falling. Sometimes, the prophecy is a complex, heartbreaking vision. Other times, it's just a number. Our last story for this section begins, as so many unsettling nights do, with a power outage. The man telling the story went to the fuse box and found a note from his landlord. If power goes out, check the boiler room in the basement. And this is where the dream begins to feel deliberate, manipulative, because your subconscious knows the exact geography of your fear. It knows the places you avoided as a child, and for this man, that place was the basement. In his dream, he walked down the familiar wooden stairs into the pitch-black cellar. He'd always hated it down there. As a kid, he swore he could hear the old boiler groaning like a dying man. Now, in the dream, that sound was back. A low, rhythmic moan coming from the far corner. He felt a dreadful pull towards the boiler room, as if the dream itself was leading him by the hand. As he got closer, he saw a faint light under the door, a deep, pulsing, unnatural red. He reached for the handle, and as his fingers touched the cold metal, a voice spoke. It wasn't in the room, it was inside his head. Imagine a voice whispering right behind your ear, so close you can almost feel the breath, but there's nothing there. It was chanting, a simple, rhythmic 3-digit number. 3, 1, 4. Over and over. 3, 1, 4. The red light under the door pulsed in time with the chant. The moaning from the boiler grew louder. 3, 1, 4. He tried to pull his hand away, tried to run, but he was paralyzed. The voice got more intense, more demanding. 3, 1, 4, and he woke up instantly. His eyes snapped open to the darkness of his bedroom. The chant was gone, but the echo of it, the sheer dread, was still vibrating in his bones. He felt an overwhelming, inexplicable compulsion. He scrambled for his phone on the nightstand, his fingers fumbling with the screen. He knew, somehow, he already knew what he was going to see. And there it was, on the screen, glowing in the darkness, 3:14 a.m. We've heard a few impossible stories now. What do you think is going on here? A sixth sense? Or just our brains playing tricks on us in the dark? Let me know your theory in the comments. But what if the answer isn't just one or the other? What if there's a third option? Something we do that willingly pries open the door between worlds? One user shared a story from a night where, after a party, he was admittedly high. He fell asleep and immediately fell into a nightmare. He was in a forest, but it was silent in all the wrong ways. There was no buzz of insects, only the feel of a ghostly wind and the distant howl of a wolf. And he knew, with a certainty that only exists in dreams, that he was being hunted. He ran, branches whipping at his face, until he stumbled into a clearing and saw a house. It was empty, strange. Inside, everything was black and white, as if the color had been stripped from the world. He hid in a room, catching his breath, and peered out the window. A shadow fell across the glass. Then came the sound. Knock, knock, knock. Steady, patient. He jolted awake in his bed, heart pounding against his ribs, sweat chilling his skin. He was safe. The dream was over. But the knocking wasn't. It was the same rhythm, the same patient, deliberate sound. For a heart-stopping second, he thought the dream was still clinging to him, but then he realized the sound wasn't coming from inside his head. It was coming from his bedroom window. A knock on your window in the dead of night, it's a primal fear. But I've held on to one story that suggests something even more terrifying. Not a nightmare bleeding into reality, but reality disguising itself as a nightmare. This account comes from a user who says it remains the single most disturbing thing he has ever experienced. It started, as they so often do, in a dream. He was in his own house, but it was wrong. A dream house. The lights were on, but they cast long, distorted shadows, and every time he glanced at a window, he was met with the same impossible sight. Nothing. Not the darkness of a suburban night, not the familiar shape of a neighbor's roof. It was a perfect, featureless, silent blackness, a vacuum where the world should have been. He felt a sense of cosmic isolation, like his house was the last bubble of existence floating in an endless void. Then he heard it. A sound, a rhythmic banging, faint but insistent. It seemed to be coming from the laundry room. He walked towards the sound, his dream self compelled to investigate. As he got closer, the sound stopped, only to start again, this time from the kitchen. It was playing a game with him. He followed it there, his heart starting to pound in that muffled, dreamlike way. Again, as he entered the kitchen, the banging stopped. And then it started again. This time, it was coming from upstairs. He knew, with the chilling certainty only dreams can provide, where it was leading him. He climbed the stairs, the sound getting louder, more defined with each step. It was a heavy, deliberate pounding. Thump, thump, thump. It led him right to the end of the hall, to the small square door leading to the attic. The sound was coming from inside. His hand trembled as he reached for the knob. He opened the door and the pounding stopped. The attic was dark, but a single pale light seemed to emanate from the far corner. There, with her back to him, sat a small, frail-looking old woman in a faded floral house dress. In front of her was a simple wooden box, and as he watched, she slowly, deliberately slammed her palm down onto the lid. It made a sick, wet thud. That was the sound. She just sat there, her thin shoulders hunched, slamming her hand onto the box. Thump, thump, thump. He felt a scream building in his throat, but no sound came out. And then she stopped. She slowly turned her head. Her face was a pale mask of wrinkles, but her eyes were just dark pits. She opened her mouth, and then she opened it wider and wider still, twice as wide as any human could. From the impossible, black cavern of her throat, a silent, world-shattering scream erupted, and she leaped towards him. He woke up instantly, his body drenched in cold sweat, his heart hammering against his ribs so hard it hurt. The dream scream was still echoing in his mind, but the house was silent, deathly silent. He lay there, trying to catch his breath, trying to push the image of her face out of his mind. And then he heard it. Bang! From downstairs. It was a sound so similar to the one in his dream that his blood ran cold. He froze, listening. Was he still dreaming? Was this some cruel trick of a half-asleep mind? He strained his ears, listening past the roar of blood in his head. Bang! Louder this time, at the front door. This was real. This was not a dream. Adrenaline, cold and sharp, flooded his system. He threw the covers off, his feet hitting the cold floor. He didn't turn on a light. He crept out of his bedroom and down the hall to the kitchen, his mind screaming. He grabbed the largest butcher knife from the block. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He crept into the living room, heart in his throat, and crouched behind a large armchair that faced the front door. He waited. Every creak of the house was a footstep. Every shadow was a figure. He could hear the man outside shuffling his feet on the porch. He just waited there, crouched in the dark, clutching a knife, listening for the sound of splintering wood or shattering glass, but it never came. After a few agonizing minutes that felt like an eternity, he heard footsteps walking away down his driveway. He waited. He waited for a long, long time, until the sun began to faintly light the edges of the windows. Only then did he dare to stand, his legs weak. He crept to the window and looked out, and there, At the end of his driveway, just before turning onto the street, was a man in a dark hoodie, the man who had been pounding on his door. And that's when the most terrifying realization of all washed over him. He later wrote, and I quote, "I thought it was just crazy and horrifying that the pounding and banging from this potential robber or killer didn't wake me up. Rather, it became the key point to a horrifying dream." Let that sink in for a moment. The sound of a very real, physical danger right outside his door, a sound that should have jolted him awake, didn't. Instead, his subconscious, in a desperate act of self-preservation, did something far stranger. It took that raw, violent noise and refused to let it be ignored. It didn't just register the sound, it translated it. His mind built a stage in the attic, cast a terrifying old woman, and directed a personal horror show, all to make sense of a threat he wasn't even conscious of. His brain didn't just warn him, it screamed at him in the only language it knew he would listen to: pure terror. And that's the question that sits in the silence after the screaming stops, isn't it? Is that what we've been hearing tonight? The brain's desperate last line of defense, translating real-world danger into demons and omens? Or is it something else? A crack in the wall of our reality, letting whispers from the other side seep through. The veil between the world you're in right now and the world of nightmares is terrifyingly thin. So the next time you find yourself in a dream that feels a little too real, you have to wonder what your mind, or something else, is trying to tell you. If these stories chilled you to the bone, let me know by hitting that like button. And be sure to subscribe for more journeys into the unexplained. Stories like this often walk a fine line and can disappear at any moment. So, make sure you're following so you don't miss the next one.